And we're back. Good morning. All right, so the previous video we were doing a layout drawing or shop drawings of this water table. And I've added a few more dimensions here just to kind of help with layout. But I believe we're done for the most part with the layout that we needed to provide. So now let's move on to the actual shop drawings themselves, or detail drawings that we will include with this layout. I still have to fix this one over here. So we know that we're going to fabricate a standard piece. It's 2'4" long. Okay. Standard piece is going to be fabricated 2'4". This is the dimension, or this is the profile. But we're also going to have to manufacture some special pieces for these corner columns and these columns here. So let's get started with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy these certain sections. Let's go ahead and drag them over here. I'm going to copy one of these column sections and drag it over here as well. All right, so the first step is deleting all the lines that we don't need. And that's relatively simple. Just get rid of these dimension lines here. We're going to use the trim tool. Essentially, when you use the trim tool, you have two options. You can either click the trim tool, right click to activate it, then left click and see if there's going to be any intersectable lines that it's automatically going to delete it from. Apparently not. So trim, right click to activate. Actually, I take that back. Trim, you're going to select the lines that you want to trim to, then you're going to right click to activate, and then you're going to drag it across. Okay, something's wrong here. Oh, apparently these are already individual lines. So stupid me, don't need to use the trim tool. We can just select them and delete. So now that we've got rid of those lines, we can do the same thing on the other side. Select those, delete. Now we're left with just the pieces that we're going to need for the column, okay? Now, we need to separate these pieces a little bit. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to grab ourselves a dimension line that's smaller so we can provide a little bit better detail, put some measurements on this. The goal of what we're doing is to provide a detail on how these pieces are supposed to be fabricated. The end result, or how you do it, doesn't matter. The end result is the most important part. So I'm probably going to just leave it like it is, and I'm going to separate this out a little bit so I have some room to put some dimensions on it. The goal is just to make it look as professional as possible, okay? That's really the only goal here. Provide our people with dimensions that they would need to be able to manufacture it. Okay, and that was one of the reasons why I'm going to move this out a little bit. Looking at this from the upper portion, this is a right and this is a left. 4-inch return. Pretty much the same thing there. Okay. Okay. That is a pretty good broken out detail, or an exploded view of what the column pieces need to look like from the top down. It's going to be using the same profile, okay? Same profile, no change in profile, they're just different sizes. Let's move on to this column. Let's go ahead and delete the dimension lines that we don't need, delete the lines that we don't need. Now we're left with these two pieces. Let's go ahead and move these back over a little bit closer to where we're working. Now, based on what I'm looking at and based on experience, this piece should also work for this side. In other words, both pieces, or one piece, the same design, should work, because you're just taking this piece, rotating it around on the same plane of view and sticking it on the other side. So there is no left or right. It should be universal. So there's no need to have two of them drawn. So we will only draw one. We will only have one included in our detail drawing. So let's go ahead and add dimensions to this. All right, so for the most part, those are the only dimensions that we really need to add. Okay, because both sides are identical, so there's no real reason to have the same dimensions on this side, considering it's supposed to be identical. Okay, so now we have this, we have this. Now let's go back and look at the other corner column to make sure that the pieces that we're going to make here are also going to work on this. In theory, they also should work, because you're just taking this column and rotating it halfway around and using the same pieces. So in theory, it's the same column. You're just rotating it and using it here. So it technically should work. Okay? All right, now let's go back to our detail drawing. Now that we have all of our drawings, I mean, really, all of our drawings are done. We have our standard piece, we have our corner piece, we have our standard pilaster. Next step is layout. Okay, so we're going to go to our layout tab. I've got predetermined layouts here. Oops, I apologize. Let's click on the save button and just make sure that we've saved all of our work up till now and it doesn't crash and cause us to lose anything. AutoCAD's famous for doing that. Okay, as you can see, some previous layout drawings that I already have here for stuff that we've already fabricated. I'm going to go ahead and grab this sheet and copy it, because we've already got the layout here. And the same size is probably going to work out well for this layout drawing that we need to provide. Normally I would put all of our stuff on normal size paper, which is this, 8.5 by 11s. But when you start providing layout drawings, larger layout drawings like these and these, the measurements can start to get quite small. And if they get too small, it's really kind of useless. So we're going to go ahead and grab this sheet, make a copy of it. So copy that. Just want to drag it over. Okay, now we have an exact copy of page 6. Let's make sure, okay, it looks like that was 7. We'll change that. You always want to make sure you check up on your page numbers and update. All right. So we're actually going to call this, we're going to have to call it, we're going to have to drag it down here and call it something different, because our pages are already in order and we don't want to mess that up. They've already been submitted. So let's drag these over. Let's go ahead and move this down here in line. So we have page 7, now we have page 8. Let's go ahead and change the page numbers. All right, so now we have page 8, okay? Now this already has a viewport. We'll get into viewports in a moment. The viewport obviously is already here because you see stuff on the page. What a viewport is basically like a window. It's a window into our model space. It provides us with a window into that space to be able to lay out anything we want on this sheet. Okay, because everything in the model view is drawn to scale. Everything on the layout tab, we're basically trying to make that 100-foot drawing or 200-foot drawing. We're trying to squeeze it into a piece of paper, a regular sized piece of paper. So we're going to double click on this. We're going to zoom out. Now you can see that everything in our model space is in this viewport. So I've got this rotated. We need to rotate this back around. Give me just a second. Whoa, okay. Looks like we have some hidden viewports here. I don't know what that's about. Let me unhide some layers here. Line. Hidden viewports. Okay. Let's get rid of these hidden viewports that I didn't know were there. Looks like we might have to recreate a viewport because this viewport's not acting properly. There should be a wheel here. I'm probably going to have to recreate it. Okay. Sometimes it's tricky. I'll just send this to the back. Okay, let's figure this out. What the heck's going on? Looks like I got multiple lines drawn for no reason. Okay, viewport. All right, so you can hover over it and tell whether it's a viewport or not. So let's go ahead and select that viewport and just delete it because apparently something's wrong with it. All right, so to create a viewport, we're going to go to our layout. We're going to click on rectangular. We're going to go ahead and make a viewport here, which gives us a fresh view of what we need to be looking at. Okay. Now we're going to zoom in to the items that we created, which is our layout for that wall. And we're going to try to fit everything on this page. Now you can see what I was telling you about, you know, once you start to try to get everything fit on the page, sometimes those dimension lines can get a little too small. But I tried to, it's trial and error. It's experimentation sometimes. Sometimes you got to lay it out, get all your dimensions on there and print the test page. See if it can be viewed. See if the measurements are too small. Okay, so let's proceed here. So this is our, excuse me, this is our layout. That's probably a pretty good spot for it. We'll have to come back and adjust some of these dimensions and things on the page. We're going to go ahead and leave this detail. Go back to the home, copy that. All right, so what we're doing is we're going to provide them with little cut details on what this profile is supposed to be, okay? And the way we do that is we make more, we make some more viewports over here to indicate what we're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this viewport. Actually, there's no need. Well, okay. I'm going to have to go and move these. So go back to our model space. We're going to go ahead and move these out of the way completely so they don't appear in our model space. And we know they're still part of this, but we don't want them to appear in our model space just yet. So now I'm going to go ahead and drag this over here. We're going to make a new viewport. let's see, probably from here to here. Again, trial and error. Double click to get inside. Let's go ahead and zoom in. All right. So this is our standard. This is going to be our standard profile, our standard piece. We will rename all of this stuff here shortly. That's our standard. Let's go ahead and create another one. Probably from here to here. Okay, it's a pretty good view of our column that we have to manufacture. So let's drag that over here a little bit, drag it a little bit up. All right, so we have our standard runner piece. We have a layout of the pieces that we need to make for the corner column. And we're just missing the pilaster piece. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create yet another viewport. Again, it's trial and error on size. And there is our piece for our pilaster. Okay. You always want to click outside your viewport. You always want to double click, because if you're inside a viewport and then you click outside thinking you're out, you're not. You're actually in the other viewport, and then you start moving stuff around, you're going to screw it up. The best thing to do is go outside your page and double click, because escape does not get you out of the viewport. Double clicking outside of it does. Okay. So let's go ahead and move this a little bit. This seems a little too big, so let's double click in that viewport. Now, if you notice, by double clicking in this viewport, it didn't put us inside the viewport that we want to be in. It put us in the main viewport. So if you start moving stuff around, you're moving the main one. Well, you don't want to do that. So to get back inside of a viewport that's on top of another viewport, you have to use some cycle commands. You have to cycle through it. So double click in the viewport. Okay, now it's Control R, and that will cycle you through the available viewports in the area. Okay, as you see. Now I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit smaller. And again, it boils down to personal preference. How it lays out on the page, you know, the prettier the better. The more cohesive, the better as well. Okay, so we have our standard piece, we have our column piece, we have our pilaster piece. Now we need to label them to make them cohesive. All right, we're going to go ahead and just copy this, because yes, we need a label on each individual item. And we're just copying. Oops, I didn't copy properly. Oops. And it doesn't matter if you overlap these lines. Yes, these lines are ugly, but they're going to go away. And I'll show you how. So you can get that a little bit closer. And reduce that line a little bit. Let's go ahead and get that closer. There you go. All right, so we are going to start labeling stuff now. This is going to be labeled the corner pilaster. Layout. We're going to call that detail. Let's see. We'll call that detail. The main detail is going to be 1. I guess we'll call that detail 2. The first one in sequence. Technically, this should have been up there, but because of the way it lays out, this is the best position to be able to get it fit in there. All right, this is our standard stretcher. Stretcher unit. All right, 2. Exterior patio. Exterior patio layout view. Okay. Water. Okay, I was able to fix that annoying problem. So let's proceed. So on this particular layout, it looks like we've finally come to a point where it looks like we might be done. We have our basic consists of a layout, something that the mason can look at on the job site and say, okay, more or less, this is what they need to do and how they need to install it. We haven't added all of the dimensions all the way around, but we're going to add some notations that's going to help the mason understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. These are the drawings that our people will be using for fabrication, the exploded views. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger now that I can click on it. Let's see. Oops, a little bit too big. It's kind of trial and error. 0.10 is okay. So essentially, my guys or our guys at the shop are going to look at this and they're going to go, okay, this is a corner pilaster layout. They're smart enough to look over here and say, okay, there's a corner pilaster, but there's another one here. That's why we write here the quantities. So NTS stands for not to scale. I just always put the quantities below that or beside that. So there's two assemblies, two identical assemblies like this that are going to be required. A little bit further down, this is the profile. So this is the only profile that we are dealing with everywhere. Okay. This is the standard stretcher unit. We're going to go ahead and change that, but first we have to count. So how many standard stretcher units are we going to require? Well, we don't have this one finished yet, but if we have this taken off in lineal footage, we could very easily figure out how many pieces, how many standard stretcher pieces we would need just by counting the lineal footage. So we'll add the quantity for standard stretcher pieces when we're done with the drawing, which is basically we need to finish this. But to figure out the quantity of the standard stretcher units that we would need, we would literally have to count them. Or if you already have them taken off in an estimating software by the lineal foot, you just take the lineal foot, let's say it's 100, and you divide it by 2'4". And that would be more or less the standard amount of stretchers that we would require. That's probably the easiest way to do it, but there's many ways to skin a cat, as they say. And then the last detail that we have here is detail 4, which is the standard pilaster. And it's all going to be the same profile. So as you see, we've tried our best to provide enough information, and actually let's go ahead and add that. I apologize. All right, so how many of these pilasters, the standard pilasters, do we need? Well, we got to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. So we're going to have 10 times 10 ACMs required. Okay, oops, why can I not type today? All right. All right, a little small there, so let's open that back up, go to text options and make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we know, my guys at the shop, our fabrication guys are gonna know we have 2 assemblies required here. We have 10 assemblies required here. Actually, because it's not drawn in an assembly, if I would have left it with the other piece down here, we could have said it was an assembly, but these are actually going to be pieces. So, because they're individual pieces on both sides. Our guys are probably smart enough to figure out, okay, this isn't an assembly. We're actually going to need 20 pieces, but we're going to go ahead and fix this. So we need 10 assemblies, but technically we're going to need 20 pieces just like this. So we're going to go in here and fix it. Just so there's no confusion, 20 pieces required. Okay, 20 pieces required, 2 assemblies required. And now we need to figure out how many of these stretcher units that we are going to require. So let us click on save, go back to the model. Let's finish this so that we can get a final count. Add in all of our detail lines. This one's a little bit more complicated. We're gonna have a special piece, it looks like, just for this column. Unfortunate. One special piece for that. Okay. Let's go back to our drawing. Yeah, this is going to die into the building. Should be 6'10" and 5/8. I have it drawn with the water table going around it. Let's double check that measurement. I don't know where I got that measurement from. From the brick to, so it's supposed to be, based on this measurement here, right, from the corner to the edge where it's supposed to die into the building, it's 6'10" and 5/8. We have it a little bbit bigger than it needs to be, which, yeah, it's okay. We can stretch that in the opposite direction, 10'6" and 5/8. Oops, not scale, stretch. 10'6". Go double check. 6'10" and 5/8. I apologize, my brain is not working today. 6'10" and 5/8. All right, 6'10" and 5/8. Let's go ahead and fix this little detail here. We need to explode these lines because they're still all one deal. Let's delete these lines because they're no longer necessary. Extend those lines all the way to the edge of the building. Bada boom, bada bing. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with here. Let's go ahead and create our lines. What was the profile size of this? It is 4 3/8. Okay, 4 3/8. Let's go ahead and grab our array tool. Grab that line, click on the longest member, measure. What were we making these? 29 inches? No, we were making them 28 inches. 2'4". Okay, now we have our line. Ew, gross. See, this is what I was talking early on in the first video. That sometimes making one standard unit will put us in sticky situations like this, where you have one itty bitty piece left over on the end of something, and well, you can't make stone grow, unfortunately. So if it's 2 feet long, the stones are 2 feet long. There's nothing you can do about it. Now, a mason has a couple options on the job site, but essentially he's going to take 4 pieces, cut them down all to even lengths, and make it work, which is fine, but it takes a really smart mason to figure that out. I mean, most masons aren't going to do that. Most masons are going to do what is drawn here. They're just going to start putting their pieces, and When they get to the end, they're going to go, oh, there's 4 inches left over. They're going to cut a small 4-inch piece, and it's going to look like crap. So in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make the adjustment in our layout drawing. Let's go ahead and adjust this to 24 inches, not even. Let's adjust it to 19 inches. See, even doing it that way, it's still going to look bad because you have all these little pieces trying to make it work, and it's just going to continue to look bad, in my opinion. So the only way to really fix this and make it look right is to make some stones, to make a few stones that are actually bigger than what we were anticipating on making. Special scenarios sometimes require special stones, but you run into a myriad of problems with that as well. On a job that has 100 stones that are all the same, and then all of a sudden you have 6 stones that are a little bit bigger, they end up being lost, or they end up being used where they're not supposed to be used because the masons don't pay attention, etc., etc., etc. So because I know this client, and I don't really think it's going to be that big of a deal, I'm going to go ahead and leave these as a standard piece and let them deal with the small leftover cut piece at the end. And to be honest with you, if you look at the design of the building, this is actually where it's dying in to the existing structure. So it probably won't be that big of a deal. It would have been a bigger deal if we were left over with small cuts here in between the pilaster, because, well, let's face it, that's just downright ugly. But dealing with one cut at the end of the building is probably not that big of a deal. So we'll leave it like that. And if the client comes back to us and says, hey, I don't like the way that looks, then we will make them one special piece to fix their situation. It's probably a cheaper scenario in the end anyways. All right, let's go ahead and take these and explode them like we did previously. Delete the lines that we don't need. Now we're going to go ahead and mirror them over to the other side. And you know what? Instead of using the mirror tool on this one, I want to show you another method when you're drawing lines or joint lines through something. You can use the extend tool. Okay, that's another option. So click on your extend tool. You can click on the most outer line that you want the joint lines to be extended to. This line, for example. You're going to right click to execute that tool, and you're going to come back and draw a line or select your lines down here. You see how they automatically jump over to the line that you selected? Yeah, then you're going to go enter. Now you're going to have to come back and use the trim tool, right click, and trim those center lines. So that's also an option when you're just doing simple stuff and you don't want to use the mirror tool. There's plenty of tools at your disposal, so it's best to learn how to use them all. All right, so now there's this little booger here, this little booger. Something that we didn't plan for, but it's obviously there and we have to make it. So that's going to be a special piece. Either it's going to be a special piece, or we can also just draw a line through it and make it 2 pieces. Why would we do that? Well, we're already going to make this piece, right? And this piece here is basically the same thing as this piece here. The only difference is that, well, this piece is longer, which is good, right? So let's check some dimensions and make sure it actually is the same. Well, it's 6 on the inside. Well, we're off to a bad start. 4. Okay, so unfortunately, it's not the same. So unfortunately, that piece is literally going to need to be made special. Let's go back to the drawings and kind of look at this piece. Wish there was a way to rotate this. Let's see, I'll just click on this to be able to drag a line. 6 inches, I'd like to know, I'm thinking that's what they're talking about here, but I need to be able to verify that. So it looks like, yeah, it totally does. So that's 6 inches. Which I believe is the dimension that I have drawn here. It should be 6 inches from brick to brick. Remember, this 3/4 inch chamfer is the actual stone. So from here to here, yep, that's 6 inches. So now that we've verified our measurements, yes, unfortunately this piece is going to have to be made special. It's a special piece. There's really no way to get around it. So we'll come back to that in a minute. We're going to have to copy, move that over, delete the lines that we don't need. Yeah, we can delete these. Delete the lines that we don't need. That's the piece that we have to manufacture. Unfortunately, there's really no way to get around it. It's going to have to be made. So let's go ahead and drag this piece up and place it with the others. Let's go ahead and rotate it to match the same. There you go. Being organized is very important. I know it may look like I'm not super organized, but I am, and I know where all my stuff is at. So, all right, now that we have this over here, let's go ahead and add some dimension lines to it.